Good morning and welcome, friends. This lodge, as many others around the world, meet on Sundays to renew the bond that exists among the students of Theosophy all over the world. It is a force supported by the Masters of Wisdom, so the current that it distributes with energy can never be really lost. This particular lodge meets at 11 a.m. every Sunday for the discussion of a particular topic presented by a student of Theosophy, which is followed by questions and answers. On the first and third Sundays of the month, we're studying the Gita. All work undertaken for this effort is voluntary, whether it be time, money, or energy spent in it. And the thing that needs to be realized is that we really are not doing anything for Theosophy. It's always in the world. It does something for us. It enables that inner nature to grow, to expand, to become expressive in our everyday life, trying to help others. We, United Lodge of Theosophists, are guided by the Declaration, which states that devotion to the cause of Theosophy is without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. And it is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but it really does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion, because the work it has in hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist, then, belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Gita, chapter 3. When in ancient times the Lord of creatures had formed mankind, and at the same time appointed his worship, he spoke and said, "With this worship pray for increase, and let it be for you, Kamaduk, the cow of plenty, on which you shall depend for the accomplishment of all your wishes. With this nourish the gods, that the gods may nourish you. Thus mutually nourishing, you shall obtain the highest felicity. The gods, being nourished by worship with sacrifice, will grant you the enjoyment of your wishes. He who enjoyeth what hath been given unto him by them, and offereth not a portion unto them, is even as a thief. But those who eat not but what is left of the offerings shall be purified of all their transgressions. Those who dress their meat but for themselves eat the bread of sin, being themselves sin incarnate. Beings are nourished by food. Food is produced by rain. Rain comes from sacrifice, and sacrifice is performed by action. Know that action comes from the Supreme Spirit, who is one. Wherefore the all-pervading Spirit is at all times present in the sacrifice. He who, sinfully delighting in the gratification of his passions, doth not cause this will, thus already set in motion, to continue revolving, liveth in vain, O son of Pritha. But the man who only taketh delight in the self within, is satisfied with that, and content with that alone, hath no selfish interest in action. He hath no interest either in that which is done, or that which is not done. And there is not, in all things which have been created, any object on which he may place dependence. Therefore, perform thou that which thou hast to do, at all times unmindful of the event. For the man who doeth that which he hath to do, without attachment to the result, obtaineth to the Supreme. Today's talk is on gratitude, and next week's is on true clairvoyance.
Thank you. Welcome, friends. Here in the United States, the fourth Thursday of November is officially designated as Thanksgiving. Having gratitude for nation's bounty dates back, though, to ancient times. Proper gratitude is absolutely necessary for humanity's development. Theosophy puts forward no list of cardinal virtues nor mortal sins, but if it did, gratitude might well head the list of virtues, and ingratitude the list of mortal sins. Ingratitude is a crime. It's a crime in occultism. The masters, the custodians of secret wisdom, have declared ingratitude is not one of their vices. Gratitude is of the soul. Theosophy reveals the reasons behind all things, safeguards heart knowledge with head understanding, and leaves no why unanswered. Absent gratitude, we cannot grasp these revelations. Nature demands a price for all received, even well-earned wages. Sincere gratitude is due for everything enjoyed. So as we heard the first speaker read from the ancient Bhagavad-Gita, it enjoins that there be mutual nourishing between man and gods who minister to his needs, and calls an ungrateful taker a thief. Gratitude is the very heart of reciprocity. Gratuity means that which is given freely without strain or grudging. Genuine gratitude is a phase of spiritual knowledge itself. Like spiritual knowledge, real gratitude springs up spontaneously, vitalizes and impels toward harmonious action through joyous recognition of duty and which is due, that which is owed. Let's learn to spell right. Both spiritual knowledge and genuine gratitude partake of loyalty and devotion justice, and mercy. So inextricably interwoven is gratitude with all constructive action that no action above the lower planes of being can be imagined without the presence of gratitude. There could be no raising up of the lives on the lower planes when gratitude is lacking. Of necessity under karma, our gratitude will be tested. We might be called narrow and dogmatic if we defend the teacher and the teaching. Extreme sacrifice might be called for, where we work to keep the link unbroken. In this we shall seem to stand alone. It is truly gratitude to the whole of life that moves divine human messengers periodically to suffer in an ungrateful world, working to reach the open and seeking hearts. To this end, and for this purpose, they labor, speak, and record. But the vain and self-interested can never decipher their living message. The spirit of the teacher's words can be read only by the light of gratitude. Gratitude, when defined as recognition of benefits received, explains only half of its meaning, since recognition is largely a mental process, while gratitude involves the heart as well as the mind. The action of buddhi manas is referred to in Theosophy. Recognition and appreciation, the interplay of heart and mind. This dual energy finds expression in three directions: towards superiors, or those who bestow benefits, our teachers, for example; towards inferiors, those who give us the opportunity of bestowing benefits; and towards equals, where giving and taking become balanced. The term superior in this case is meant to convey a being who has more of whatever it is that one craves for: wisdom, peace, power, or the means to these. Its opposite, inferior, is a categorical term covering that class in need of help and support, and pertains not only to human beings, but to all kingdoms below the human. It is the opportunity to serve that should evoke our gratitude. If we accept the fundamental truth that all life is one and live accordingly, our sympathy is awakened. The cultivation of sympathy in and for the good of others grows with the elimination of selfishness and the replacing it with selflessness. Regarding all life as one, we recognize and appreciate the life-giving sun and the beneficent rain, the productive earth and the invigorating air. We find sermons in stones, their strength and stability magnified into mountains impress us with peace and power. Fruits and vegetables give sustenance to the body. Flowers and trees bring joy and beauty into life with color and perfume and shade. The animal kingdom has its usefulness to man. Even harmful animals convey a useful and wholesome lesson, for they are the product of man's furies and passions and fears. Recognizing and appreciating all this, one must have gratitude to life itself. Among our own kind, those who serve us are entitled to all the help and guidance we can give them. And who does not serve us in some way? Life is, or should be, a constant exchange of benefits, even if only an encouraging word, or a simple thank you, or a smile. Farther up in the scale of humanity, there are those to whom we listen for knowledge and help and inspiration. Are they not entitled to a recognition and appreciation of benefits received? While the self in each of us is a real teacher, yet there are those who have pointed to the way of knowledge of the real self. Except for them, the way would have remained hidden in the deep, dark forest of superstition and ignorance. Their messengers sent out into the world to proclaim that there is a way, worked ceaselessly, suffered, and died. But the self-evident facts concerning the way, the truth, and the life are recorded in the writings they have left as a legacy to all mankind. Earnest theosophists, those who desire spiritual development above all things, and are eager to make theosophy a living power in their lives, should pause here and reflect. Upon the altar of their hearts, they should make the sacrifice of selfless and uncharitable thoughts and desires, and upon that same altar offer up a devout recognition and appreciation of benefits received. So this brings us to the law of sacrifice, which is a much misunderstood word. Its association with religious and ascetic notions has given it a wrong significance. For example, the sacrifice of Christ, who died on the cross for our salvation, and with its attendant vicious belief in vicarious atonement, is a corrupted expression of a sublime truth known to the world centuries before the Christian era. Sacrifice proceeded from the Supreme. It exists as an invisible presence at all times, extending from the sacrificial fire to the heavens, forming a bridge or ladder by means of which the sacrificer can communicate with the world of devas and ever ascend, when alive, to their abodes. It is one of the forms of akasa, wherein which the mystic word, or its underlying sound, calls it into existence. Pronounced by the priest initiate, or yogi, this word receives creative powers and is communicated as an impulse on the terrestrial plane through a trained willpower. Mother Nature, bountifully emptying herself in her myriads of forms, makes such a sacrifice. The gratitude expression of the Chela of old was this: salutations to the glorious Guru. My sight blinded by the darkness of ignorance, the Guru restored to me the light of wisdom. The disciple embodies the invisible one wisdom of the Master, and every Shela follower has his guru predecessor, and one holy chain spoken of as the Guru Parampara chain. The human constitution is a composite one. Man's highest or spirit pole is a portion of the one life, universal and unitary. It emerges from its state of spiritual unconsciousness and migrates to the plane of mentality, still intellectually unconscious, and from there its inherent energizing power functions. Like the grub which becomes a butterfly, that which becomes man passes through all the forms and kingdoms and human shapes till self-consciousness comes to birth. Then progressing onward through savagery to citizenship and beyond to perfect sageship, the Mahatma is born. But all the time it is one and the same being. That pole of our being, which is the lower material, enjoys the sacrificial offering of the higher spiritual. Thus buddhi comes to be because Atma limits itself by its own inherent power. Body is formed because prana, the life-giving breath, sacrifices itself as a connecting, nourishing link, holding in unison the countless lives who make the form Rupa. Manas sacrifices itself to redeem the combined nature of the same law which joins buddhi to mana. So man is a small copy of nature and contains in himself centers through which all the great forces of nature may be operated. Man is identical with the absolute unmanifested and also with the deity as we see it manifested in nature. Man and nature are one. It is on the acceptance or rejection of the teaching of the unity of all in nature and its ultimate essence that a real comprehension of the cosmogenesis and anthropogenesis of the secret doctrine depends. It comes to this: mankind in its first prototypal shadowy form is the offspring of the Elohim of life, or Petris. In its qualitative and physical aspect, it is the direct progeny of the ancestors, the lowest diones, or spirits of the earth. For its mortal, psychic, and spiritual nature, it is indebted to a group of divine beings, collectively men, who are handiwork of hosts of various spirits. Distributively the tabernacles of those hosts, and occasionally and singly the vehicles of some of them. The teaching about the hierarchies of intelligences of differing degrees has to be grasped to gain a clearer comprehension of the sacrifice made by those who possess higher forms for the benefit of those who are lower in the scale of evolution. The law of yajna is the foundation of manifestation itself, say the ancient scriptures. Through the law of sacrifice, man succeeds in paying his own karmic debts. Through it, he learns that the cause and effect aspects of karma are not to be separated, as they are one in reality. Thus man recognizes that pleasure and pain are not to be regarded in the light of reward and punishment, but both have to be taken as avenues to experience. When action is performed as sacrifice, its reaction is altruistic, says the Gita. But the man who only taketh delight in the self within is satisfied with that and content with that alone, hath no selfish interest in action. He hath no interest either in that which is done or that which is not done. And there is not, in all things which have been created, any object on which he may place dependence. Therefore perform thou that which has to be done, at all times unmindful of the event. For the man who doeth that which he hath to do, without attachment to the result, obtaineth the supreme. Altruism and selfishness work within our constitution. The lower nature in man fails to appreciate the sacrifice made for it, and on its behalf by the higher. Failing to listen to the voice of Buddhi in him, man fails to hear the music of nature. The conflict of human principles pushes the individual to compete with his neighbor. Because of this war and conflict within, even man's virtues often cause him anguish. Love producing jealousy, the sense of justice resulting in anger, the ardency of service causing impatience, and spiritual progress itself engendering pride. The maintenance of the right attitude and its unbroken expression through continuous right approach to the problems of life compel man to recognize his own individual responsibility to all beings of all kingdoms, to nature itself. The prolific Mother Earth, the cleansing waters, the vitalizing fire, the health-giving air, the constructive and regenerating electrical and magnetic forces, to all these is due a great debt. The color and fragrance of flowers on earth, the brilliance of distant orbs in heaven, the nourishment which plant life bestows on our bodies, that which the beauty and majesty of space bestow on our minds, to them we owe a mighty acknowledgement. Men recognize obligations for kindness done and service rendered by fellow men. We have not yet begun to realize our responsibility and our duty to all the kingdoms of nature. It is necessary for us to contemplate how invisible and visible aspects of all nature flow into us, and how from us radiate beneficent or baneful influences to every kingdom, and literally to the four quarters of space itself. A clear perception of the compassion of nature, which is the energy of sacrifice, arises from the study of the metaphysics of the secret doctrine. The personal principles embodying themselves in personalities, the return to those ultimate principles as perfected individualities results from that study. The book is for the student of occultism. These really esoteric tenets are not for any other than the quiet, contemplative student who, putting aside comic excitements of the lower mind, will brood and ponder over them with the aid of buddhimanas, or intuitional intelligence. Such a study alone destroys the inner conflict and the lustful propensity to live in the objects of the senses. Says the voice of the silence, there Klesha is destroyed forever, Tanha's roots torn out. But stay, disciple, yet one word, canst thou destroy divine compassion? Compassion is a law of laws, eternal harmony. Elias self, a shoreless universal essence, the light of everlasting right, and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. The more thou dost become at one with it, thy being melted in its being, the more thy soul unites with that which is, the more thou wilt become compassionate, absolute. HPV defines this compassion as an abstract, impersonal law whose nature, being absolute harmony, is thrown into confusion by discord, suffering, and sin. Energizing himself by compassion, the emancipated soul, on the threshold of final nirvana, performs the supreme sacrifice of remaining with the darkness of the world and radiating the light of wisdom of his own diamond heart. He sacrifices himself for the sake of mankind, though but a few elect may profit by the great sacrifice. Not only does such an one remain with the world, but incarnates among the children of men, free. He assumes the bondage of flesh, above karma. He shoulders the responsibility of contacting causes and effects. Beyond the influences of yugas and cycles, age by age, he is one with their vicissitudes. Says Sri Krishna, I produce myself among creatures, O son of Bharata, whenever there is decline of virtue and an insurrection of vice and injustice in the world, and thus I incarnate from age to age for the preservation of the just, the destruction of the wicked, and the establishment of righteousness. In these verses, the student should note the triple law of compensation, cycle, and sacrifice in unison. In another place, Sri Krishna declares that Adi Yanja is myself in this body, O best of embodied men. Contemplation on such sacrifice kindles the fire of devotion in the human heart. As the child's first feeling is for its mother, so the first spiritual aspiration of the awakening inner nature is for the man of fire who embodies and expresses that devotion through his sacrifice. At his flame we kindle our little lamp, and protecting it against the winds of impurity, the fogs of superstition, the mist of sense attractions, the biting snow of selfishness, we march forward to the Holy of Holies. Very uplifting message for this pre-Thanksgiving time. Thank you for your attention, and I'll turn the floor over to comments and questions. Well, this is a special time of the year. You see a hand here.
So then from your talk, sacrifice and gratitude seem to be a pair.
Yes. Seems to us that you cannot have one without the other.
So
that's real gratitude, and that's why it says sacrifice. A thank you is wonderful, but a person recognizing what has been done for them and pays it forward to those below them in knowledge is what is necessary. That is what real gratitude is.
So really then, you said there is 3 aspects to it. One, that we do this tremendous sacrifice towards our brothers that are on the lower echelons, the lower kingdoms, for instance, not just the human kingdom, because all of the writings also say that the lower kingdoms look up to men as men look up to gods. So we're their guide, in other words. And the other one is where that gratitude shows itself in give and take amongst equals. And then the passage we read from the Gita where it specifies that unless we sacrifice to the gods, then we will not be nourished correctly. And Mr. Judge somewhere says, no one has ever said that food will not be produced, but that the right kind of food will not be produced, where all of the nutrients necessary for men's welfare would be inclusive. So what do you think this age is? About cultivation of food with manipulation of genes and all these chemical compounds added to make the fruits larger or the produce bigger, because that is not the intention of nature. And in its original form, when left to its own devices, it produces the best food necessary for our nourishment. From your talk.
Well, we are here to help nature. We don't seem to get that ourselves. We wind up causing a lot of problems because of our selfishness, because of our interference by the natural processes. Interference rather than helping the natural processes. Recognition of nothing below the physical level in science. Those are the kinds of things. This is science. Much of science comes out of the secret doctrine. Advances in science occurred by leaps and bounds from about the 1880s, much of which was documented in the secret doctrine. So, we are right now sort of at the bottom. We are at the bottom, trying to curve upward on our material journey. We are here for the advance of our understandings, especially the spiritual knowledge, and we can only do that through study and sacrifice and knowledge. Knowledge attained through helping others.
Well, that is also two-sided, because the true knowledge is given freely. Nothing in return is asked for it, and that there isn't any higher gift that can be bestowed upon us. So if we don't show gratitude for what we have received, then we're not doing what is needed of us.
No.
Acknowledgement that we have received it is necessary for showing that same kindness towards another who knows less than you do, and giving it freely. Perhaps this is also an area in these times in the 21st century, it is not really recognized that this is where occultism makes that very clear, that knowledge cannot be bought or sold. And here we have, amongst even theosophical students, who think that it can be done that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very important consideration to be out there. You know, we try to commercialize all this, make a profit on it. Yes, it costs to operate the lodge, but you know, that is there for us to learn from, is for us to contribute to. It's a give and take thing. And in the commercial world, we should not be, if we charge anything, should not be charging any more than we absolutely have to make do. We see people like HPV coming in front of us. They could commercially do a lot more than they actually did. They actually came to try to instill these teachings into a very material world from the masters, who are largely in the East, but we never know who they are and where they are.
So then their sacrifice was really tremendous.
Absolutely. They have no real need. This doesn't see any real need to get anything from us. They are simply there. They choose to stay and continue to suffer and be killed by our hand and the physical body anyway. The Buddhas of Christ who come before us, what do they have to gain from us? I don't know. It must be something, but you know, they are embodied, perfected beings. They're totally perfected. They have their bodies are woven by themselves in previous incarnations, to the point where they do not have any karma left to give back. They are perfect beings. They don't need to be here to develop any further. They could go well on, you know, they have that choice. The Buddha makes it, when you reach Buddhahood, you make that choice. You can come back and help out in the flesh, or go out and do other things and never return to the flesh. That's the student's understanding of the teachings. So we owe a great debt of gratitude to those beings. We don't recognize them adequately.
My question comes more from the practical viewpoint to your presentation. You said on the beginning that gratitude has two parts. One is the recognition that you are the recipient of benefits, greater or small. And then a second part to gratitude is action. I wonder if there is a gradation to action. If you're returning to society, what do you think you owe to society? Is there is there a gradation, like is something too little, or for example, what you have in excess and you give out, is that gratitude, or is just getting rid of your excess? These are practical questions.
Depends on your motive.
Oh, okay, the motive. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. If we're truly grateful for all of these things we're receiving, we are ready to go out there and do what we can to give back, whether it be material goods or knowledge. Knowledge is more, is very important. By our example, by our actions, most important by our action example, the same thing. But and also by our words and deeds and all that. Yeah, there are gradations, and you talked about it. Generally giving to society. Yeah, we may be in a better position to do more if we are high, like for example, the president. But an individual can do great things too. We don't have to. We shouldn't be sitting around waiting until we become whatever we think we should become before we do much. If we do that, we're not going to progress very much. We have to learn, apply. The only way we really learn is apply.
Do you have to act consciously in order to be grateful, or how is that connected to the motive?
It's heart and mind.
Heart and mind.
Motive, this student relates to heart. You really want to help, truly want to help, but you have to know how to help. That's where the mind comes in. Discrimination and all those factors that come into making the right decisions in terms of helping, because you can do harm by helping. Yes.
But you also said that if your motive is the correct one, a smile, a kind word, a gentle thank you, a small token of a deed that shows gratitude for what was received is just as valuable as someone who can give greater things.
Sure.
So as long as your attitude is based on love and compassion, in other words, you want to do something good for the other, I think all of the actions, small or great, are very valuable, because the action is not just on the physical plane, it's recorded, and it has its significance on those higher planes as well. If your attitude is mental, then it's recorded on the mental plane.
Absolutely.
Manas, on the psychic plane, because your compassion is a feeling as well as a deed. And on the astral plane, where you actually conduct that business before you physically carry it out. So it has ramifications all through different kingdoms, is what it is. And similar minds pick up that impress, and it moves them to do the similar actions, kind things, rather than the opposite.
Yeah, at the spiritual level, the student understands that you cannot measure like you do on the physical level. Somebody gives $1 million, or whatever the case may be. I mean, that might be just a small amount of their wealth, and they're doing it because they want to become more in favor with people, become more popular, or whatever. It gets into that. The smallest thing that we see on the physical level might be, well, in fact, if you do it with the right heart, with the right motive, and when it needs to be done, do no more, do no less and is necessary. When we become that perfected, sometimes a thank you is all it takes to motivate everyone and everything to the right direction. And that's all that's necessary. Most of the time, it's also action.
And you mentioned that motive and action and what else did you say? Okay, in regards to that,
Knowledge, go ahead.
Yeah, and the example. Yeah, you said example, your deeds are examples. Like you become a role model. And I read that there are 3 degrees of influence. Like Tunja was saying, okay, a simple thank you could be, nothing is small in the material world.
Right.
A simple thank you. So you encounter someone with a good attitude, like grateful or like with kindness, and then it has repercussions.
Of course.
There are 3 degrees of influence, and imagine that other person will influence 3 other people. And imagine if the deeds are like larger than a smile or a thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing to think about, the 3 degrees of influence in the material world.
And those who embody this kind of gratitude, it shows. You can, they walk in, they're glowing, and before long, everybody else is glowing too. It's the example of the little videos we see about the monk walking onto a train of people who are just sitting and paying attention to the little whirls and the 100 of people, whatever, and he starts smiling and maybe a laugh at the right time and things like that. For long, the whole train has changed their
energy.
Thinking. Yeah, the energy has now become more universal. So that can clearly happen on a national and international scale.
But the opposite of that is also true, and that is why they tell us to use extreme caution and discrimination. Because there was an article in the Theosophical movement where they were saying we need to also make sure that our help to the other does not become something they expect of you, and they're becoming a vegetable. They're not going out and making an effort for themselves. They expect you to provide it for them. That is also not recommended.
Our discrimination is poor in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, because
you should never do somebody else's duty. But by the same token, we can help each other along and do our duty. With help is wonderful.
We should not make the other person a lazy, sluggish person who are not willing to do anything for themselves, and they become dependent on you, and they're becoming lazier and lazier as the time goes on, and you're providing all the help. And they warn us, it's in the Theosophical Movement magazine, I think it was either last month or the previous one, that you need to be extremely careful when you provide that help, that the other person does not expect it of you on a continuum and become dependent on you for that help. That they go out and make an effort for themselves. Because HPB has an article where she says, suppose you went out and worked in the fields, and the other person is sitting with his legs crossed, smoking, and then expects you to pay them your wages. And she says, would you do it? In other words, you have to reason it. You have to use your discrimination as to how you're going to do it, and not make the other person dependent on you for that help.
That's
on a continuum. That you give it, and then you say, okay, now it's time for you to go out and do your own thing, because you have received enough help. You can manage your own affairs yourself and not become dependent on you.
Heart and mind is what you just kept saying over and over again in your comments there.
Yeah, that your mind...
Motive, heart, mind.
Sometimes the heart overtakes and your discrimination totally disappears because you care for the other person. But if you're making them a vegetable and dependent on you, you are not doing them any favors, because that dependence will increase rather than the other person becoming self-sufficient. Because in this philosophy, the most important aspect of it is that we learn to stand on our own feet, that we become
Right.
self-sufficient, self-reliant, and self-seeking. And you have to be able to put that effort forth, or you're not going to be able to do it. We cannot depend on others to supply all of the necessary things for us without
Yeah.
contributing to it.
There is a children's book about what you're saying. It's about a hen in the farm that wanted to eat bread but needed to collect the seeds and kept asking all the farm animals to help her until no one wanted to help. It's very interesting, the analogy
Yeah.
to that, until she did it by herself.
Mhm.
And it took a long time for the process, the steps she had to take.
To learn it.
And then when she finally had the bread baked and everything, all the farm animals wanted part of that without working.
For
She said, okay, you didn't do this, this, and this. And that's a good example of
Yeah.
one has to do the part on the society or
to
whatever.
contribute. You
Yeah, to contribute.
but not at the expense of making the other person dependent. That once that help is given, then the other person gets up and says, okay, I am now going to contribute to this effort, whatever it may be, and shows gratitude for what was received by taking action himself or herself to contribute to that effort.
Yeah.
It's important.
Just, teaching one to fish or giving them a fish,
Yes.
Hey, if one is hungry right now,
You want
that's
the
what
fish.
you do. The Catholics are very good about that. Son went to
Yeah.
Catholic school,
Uh-huh.
and they taught them to make sandwiches and go out and give them to the poor. And so so that's really important to get things going. But once that stomach is taken care of, then the person has to realize to get the next meal, I've got to go learn to fish, and that motivation has to be there. Yes, we can help that along, but I don't think we can make it make it happen. We can help it happen.
In Germany, they have a tremendous penal system. They don't penalize the people who make errors in judgment and commit certain things. They provide them opportunities to get out of that circumstance. It's the same thing with their poor. They provide for the poor, but in return, the poor have to take some kind of responsibility, cleaning the streets or whatever. It's not free, in other words. And I think that is a tremendous example for this gratitude aspect of this talk today. That something is given, but it's not totally free. That something in return for that received is expected. And I think it teaches responsibility to the person. It does not give you the sense of entitlement.
True.
Yeah.
True. Okay, I guess our time is about up. Next, what are we doing next week?
Clairvoyance.
Clairvoyance is next week.
True clairvoyance.
True clairvoyance. Very important part of this process. So, thank you for joining us.